Let me ask you about how vulnerable you think the Tories' lead in the polls is on these allegations of underfunding the NHS. This is a sore point, perhaps, for the party.
Well, look, the NHS is a huge and complex organisation. The last government took a very bold decision to put a huge amount of additional funding into the NHS, an extra £34 billion a year, and Boris Johnson has made it clear that he will continue that trend and indeed go further in the future. The NHS needs to be properly funded, but it also needs to be constantly managed and monitored so that it can cope with the challenges that such a vast organisation faces. And you will never get to a situation where in an organisation employing 1.3 million people, treating hundreds of thousands of patients every day, you can't find a story to broadcast or write about in the newspapers. That's in the nature of such a huge organisation. But I am clear that we have a fantastic health service in the UK, delivering fantastic healthcare to an unprecedented number of patients.
Clearly you're still, well, I think you're still a member of the Conservative Party. You're standing aside in this election, though, as we know. How big a majority do you expect the Conservative Party to achieve here, if that is your base case assumption?
Yeah, so I'm not running in this election, but I remain a member of the Conservative Party and a Conservative supporter. And I think all the pointers are that Boris Johnson will win this election with a majority. The question is the size of that majority. And in my view, the bigger the majority, the more authority the Prime Minister will have to take Britain forward. And I think it's very important that we do have a clear mandate after this election to get Britain moving again.
What do you think will change depending on the size of the majority, Philip? What kind of Brexit do you think will be created if Boris Johnson has a very large majority or has a very slim majority?
Well, look, first of all, if Boris Johnson forms the next government, I'm sure that Brexit will be done very quickly, in the sense that we will push the withdrawal agreement through Parliament and leave the European Union within a matter of weeks, whether the majority is big or small. The difference will be in what happens next in terms of the negotiation of a future relationship with the European Union, and indeed looking more widely at what Britain's future trade relationship is going to be with the United States and other partners. For me, the whole point of leaving the European Union is that we now have choices, and we have to exercise that choice in Britain's best interest to protect Britain's jobs, to make sure our economy grows so that we can finance the public services that we want in the future, so that we can deliver the tax cuts that Boris Johnson has talked about. That means the best possible trade outcome for the UK. And we shouldn't go into this with any preconceptions. We should talk to our European neighbours about what they're prepared to offer Britain by way of a trade deal. We should talk to the Americans about what they're prepared to offer. And then we should come to a conclusion about what is in Britain's best interest. And the more of a majority the Prime Minister, the bigger majority the Prime Minister's got, the more moral authority he will have to lead the country in whichever way it needs to go.
You lost the whip, of course, with the Conservative Party, Philip, because of your protests against no deal. How do you assess the chance of ending up on WTO rules and having no deal at the end of 2020?
Well, there's still a risk, and that's why I would like to see Boris Johnson win this election with a decent majority, so that he is not beholden to a small group of extremists within the party. I'd like to see him have the latitude and the moral authority to do what is right for Britain, and I think that means completing Brexit and then negotiating a deal with the European Union that allows us to continue the very substantial pattern of trade that we have with Europe, so that Britain's exporters, Britain's businesses, British jobs are protected in the future. The big danger was leaving in 2019 without a deal. We avoided that outcome. Now we have to make sure that we don't leave in 2020 without a deal. We have to make sure that we use the next months to negotiate a future arrangement with the European Union, whether it's a temporary interim arrangement or whether it's a permanent structure for the long term, that makes sure that we can carry on trading with the European Union, including Britain's financial services trade from the City of London, which is so important to our economy and to our exchequer. 11% of our tax revenues come from Britain's financial and business services sector.